Hey there, welcome back to the shop. Today we're going to be getting back into the rest of our 114 stage 4 kit and taking the rest of the cylinder heads off, inspecting the pistons, and looking for secondary damage. So let's get this thing apart and take a look and see what we have going on. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe. Now that we have the engine completely disassembled so that we can inspect everything, now we need to make note of all of the damages, so when I call the motor company, I know exactly what to ask for, because that lifter bore is severely damaged. There's nothing we can do about that. All of the passageways are full of metal just everywhere. Let's take a look at the individual components. We see evidence of steel material being embedded in the skirt of the piston. There's a good one right there. See if the camera will pick that up. That big old gouger. That's where a piece of steel is gotten embedded in the piston. There's a couple streaks in the liner. It's not too bad. Let's take a look at this other piston. Same thing. A few pieces of metal embedded. A couple chunks. The cylinder heads are in good shape, except for like I can stick my finger in here and move around all the little shiny bits. So there's little pieces of steel and aluminum just scattered all throughout the cylinder head. So that's no good. Let me put you in the tripod. Let's take a look at the oil pump and the cam plate, and then ultimately the cam and lifters. Here we have the aftermath of the feed pump. It's really not in that bad a shape. Like, it doesn't look like it's really that messed up. It definitely has some unusual scoring here. A few little ridges that you can feel with your fingernail up on the face of it. But realistically, it doesn't look that bad. As opposed to when I've seen other engine failures and metal moving throughout the engine. Now the scavenge pump looks a little bit worse for wear. That's to be expected because all that material was being picked up by this pump. You can see the face of the pump. It's taking the brunt of that. All those little gouges is all little pieces of steel. But realistically, it could have been a whole lot worse. Like if a big chunk would have gotten caught up in here and then bound up the pump and then locked the pump up solid. I've seen that before, where not on a Milwaukee 8, but where the pump body is cracked from it picking up something. Definitely gouged. And same back here, where some material had gotten caught between the pump and the face of the back plate. I haven't looked this pump over like specifically to find out exactly what model it is. Obviously it's a Harley Davidson model. It certainly isn't a third or a fourth generation because it doesn't have the seal on the back, but same thing in there. Some material got caught up in between. some nice gouges, if you can hear that. The cam plate, same story. Material caught up and bound in there. It looks like, I'm assuming that some of the material from the lifter as it was breaking off got caught up in this ridge, or it created like an end play situation where it jammed the cam right up against this face, because that's a unusual amount of wear right there, and the bore of it has seen better days. Again, it's not like super terrible, but it sure isn't good. Like, there is definitely some scoring in there. And same with the pinion board too. It has some definite scoring in there. But let's go look at the main cause of the problem, the lifters and the cam. So here's the main problem, the failed lifter. This has a early style Screamin lifter. There's a later style that's over here to the far right where we'll compare them. But this earlier style, this lifter is just so completely, like, what a tough life it had. It got bound up on the inside, and it was, to me it looks like the axle and the rollers suffered damage. It locked up the roller. As it wore more and more, the roller got pinched between, this would essentially be the top of the lifter bore, and then the camshaft. And it had been spinning for a while in bad shape. Look at all that damage. Like, it looks like somebody just took it right to a bench grinder. That's exactly what it looks like, is a bench, like a terrible job on the bench grinder. And then it finally got stuck. See? It's got a big old D shape in it for Detroit. But look at how terrible that is. It got so hot that it discolored the whole rest of it, and it cracked on the opposite side. I don't know if you can see that crack. It's pretty crazy. But what I notice here is that the side of the lifter is in really good shape. What had ultimately damaged the engine case, once this got so much play in between the axle getting worn, the bearings being worn, to me it looks like the roller was able to get jammed up sideways, pushed out this thin area of the lifter, and then as this went up and down, it damaged the engine case. But what I don't see here is any type of indication of damage to the side of the lifter. That's going to be one big thing that I keep in mind while I look at the rest of these parts. But that lifter is completely bad. Let's take a look at the camshaft. I don't know if you can tell, but this cam lobe has had a tough life. But compared to the lifter, it doesn't look that bad. Realistically, you can see where the side of the lifter, like where there's damage there on the side, where everything had worn so much that it came down and it contacted this face. You got caught there and then dragged and dragged and dragged. There's a funny amount of like material transfer where it's raised up in the center, and then it looks like some of that material, as all the metal was breaking off, all those hardened pieces of metal was flinging around. It got caught up a little bit in the inner cam bearing, damaged that a little bit. But the main failure here I see is the lifter. Now, like I'm saying, this is an early set of Screamin lifters. Let me bring over a current model setup. And let me drop you down a little bit, see if I can get you closer, a little bit closer. I forgot where I left off, but when I originally pulled these rollers out, I was thinking that they didn't look that bad, like comparatively speaking compared to the rest of the lifter. until I realized that they're all tapered. None of them are straight. They all have a tapered fit to them. And then I was thinking, I wonder what those look like in comparison, because I was assuming that these smaller rollers were the same smaller rollers that come in a stock lifter, because they're just about the same size. But as I got to measuring everything, they are not that roller. They are the same size roller as the newer Screamin' Eagle lifter. I don't know if you can see like the size difference there, but it's shrunk. It's shrunk a lot. I just kind of wanted to look around in between the differences in between the current Screamin' Eagle lifters, the older ones that I've seen before with these black bodies, and then stock lifters. So when I measure a stock lifter axle, .298-ish. When I measure the Screamin' Eagle axle, .298-ish. And over here, if you didn't see, that's the rest of the lifters that came out of the damaged vehicle. And that lifter axle is .298-ish. So they all have the same size axle, which is interesting. Then, because the rollers are bigger, the hole in the roller's got to be smaller, or the hole in the roller's got to be bigger as well, right? So let's take a look at that. So your regular stock roller is .423-ish. We're going to come back to that one. The new Screamin' Eagle is bigger. That makes sense, to make room for the larger rollers. We'll call it just .452-ish. And then the roller that comes in this style lifter is also .453-ish. Yeah, for comparison's sake, I would say that these have the same size inner bore. So just let's look at them a little bit more and see if we see any differences. So the roller, realistically, that's what I'm going to call this thing. I'm going to call this thing the roller. The roller looks very similar, almost identical to the previous generation. It looks very similar into the way that it's made versus a stock roller. I believe this line here is just like a manufacturing way of designating that this is destined for a Screamin' Eagle lifter, where this one that has no line is destined for a stock lifter. Well, let's take a look in these things. They look very similar. Now, we aren't talking about the guts inside of the lifter today. That's just like, it's too much stuff. I don't know. I'm no engineer or metallurgist, but to me, this looks like to me, at this point, I'm not trying to say Screamin' Eagle lifters are good or bad, whatever. If they come in your kit, I recommend using them if you want warranty coverage, because if you use any type of aftermarket parts, then you will likely not have warranty coverage. So I'm not saying anything is good here, I'm not saying anything's bad, but to me this lifter looks essentially identical to this lifter, at least in the way that the roller is, in the way the bearings are, and the way the axle is, other than the little etched Screamin' Eagle little logo. Like, I didn't test the metals or anything, I'm just showing you what I find. So let's compare the broken lifter to its other three friends that were in the engine. So we're going to scoot these up and out of the way. So whenever a part fails, it always gets a bad rap. The manufacturer always gets a bad rap. You know, like if your shoe falls apart, you're going to blame whoever made your shoes, you know, K-Swiss or whatever. So the lifter failed. I'm sure everybody's going to blame Screamin' Eagle lifters and Harley Davidson and all of that. But here are the facts that I found, and I'm just going to display the facts, and you can come to your own judgment. Here's the lifter that's definitely broken and failed. Here are its friends. I took apart two of them. The last one, I couldn't get the little snap ring out of it. Like, these aren't made to be serviced or removed really, but I was able to get it out of those three. And this one also looks, feels, smells just normal, perfectly normal. But what I see here in between all of the lifter bodies is no lack of lubrication. What I see on the other roller, on the other axles, is also no real lack of lubrication. This one has some wearing in it, but then this other one doesn't. Isn't that interesting? And I don't know if you noticed, but when you looked in the bottom of these, there aren't any oil holes. Like, it's not like oil shoots out of the bottom of this. It's sprayed on this roller. As far as I'm aware, oil drips around this board because it sits in the engine like this. Oil comes through this passage. It goes through here and up through the plunger and up to the top end. And then it also pressurizes this little valley through here and then drips down. And when it drips down, it gets on the camshaft, and then the camshaft, because it's spinning, the camshaft flings oil up into the bottom of here, and that's how you get the lubrication to these rollers. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, because I don't see any lack of lubrication here, I don't see any lack of lubrication in the rest of the engine, only here on these rollers, I would assume when these things were originally installed, if you've seen my other videos, you see where I have a Jim's lifter tool where you submerge the lifters in the oil and it pulls a vacuum on it and pulls all the air. But when you install fresh lifters, you're supposed to submerge them in oil so that it gets oil everywhere. I would be assuming that this setup probably got assembly lube put around the bore of it, slid in the engine assembled and started, and then it took a while for oil pressure to build up, to get around here, go through the top end, to build up around here, and then to drip on the camshaft, and then for the camshaft to fling oil up around the roller and then into the bearings. Like, that sounds like a long path to take, but that's just my assumption from what I see. I don't know. I didn't assemble it. I don't know who did. I wasn't there when it was done. Maybe this is just a localized lifter failure. I don't know. But now that we know all of the damages to the engine, now the next task for me to do is to call corporate and pray and ask them for a new engine and an oil pan, and hopefully they send me one. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to pray real quick, then I'm going to call them. And they usually ask for pictures. They usually ask for a copy of the information that's in the ECM as far as the tuned status and the calibration status. So we will provide them with that. And then they will make a decision and then tell me what to do. So that's where we're at. I don't know if any of this was helpful to anybody, but I learned a little bit more about lifters than I knew before. So hopefully you did too. But thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Loud knocking noise. So after doing a teardown and an assessment of it, the front exhaust lifter, like the roller, it locked up in the lifter and ground like a very serious flat spot. Well, that's it for today on this project. We got all the information carried over to the motor company that they asked for. So like I was saying, hopefully they just send me a whole new engine. I would love that. That would be best for the customer. So we will find out. When I get that information, I'll bring it back and we'll get to going on some other project. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Bye.